This story comes from the pages of Aliens vs. Avengers, issue number 2. Please support the official release. The next issue opens in a very similar manner to the film Alien Covenant, where we see what appears to be the android David arrive in his ship to the engineer homeworld. As the alien race would curiously look to the skies at the humanoid, we would see this timeline was quite different, as he was joined by 3 identical models of himself. As the androids looked on with great curiosity at their creators, this would quickly turn to feelings of disgust, as they now felt they were the superior life forms, and this mysterious race were nothing more than ants to them. In a horrifying next set of panels, the androids would disperse thousands of canisters of the mysterious black goo from the alien saga, which would rain literal hell upon the engineers, tearing their bodies apart, resulting in the mass genocide of these once great people. 100 years later, we would see that this trio of Davids had conquered over 10,000 planets, where we see one looking over a world while holding the skull of one of his victims. Having just taken this planet, the android would tell his brother that the feeling this time was different than before, as they had now officially wiped out all life in this universe. The brother would then ask if he was feeling sentimental over this, where David would then crush the skull and respond with a no, where he'd then tell him that he felt great relief to rid reality of these lesser beings. Fast forwarding 1,000 years later, we see these same androids looking over a bizarre tentacle-like substance inside a giant tank. And not fully realizing just what this organism was, what the brothers did know was that it gave them access to not just other planets, this would give them access to other worlds, worlds full of life that needed to be extinguished. Assembling their soldiers, the androids set off to these other worlds, all to enact their zero mortal plan across every dimension they could find. Things then go back 20 years earlier, where we are taken to a futuristic version of Avengers Tower. Here we see an elderly man, a man whom in the previous issue we believed to be the Wayland of the Yutani Corporation from the Alien movies. However, we would be mistaken, as this is revealed to be a much older Tony Stark, who we see was having his company acquired by this universe's version of Yutani, which was run by one of the David-like androids. Cracking open a bottle of champagne to celebrate this merger, the android was surprised that Stark agreed to it so easily, where, given his track record in the past, would certainly have fought against this, and perhaps thought Stark was not as cunning or strong as he thought. Tony, despite being an old man, still had as much wit and charm as ever, where he asked the droid if it ever heard the term plain possum, a term that David, despite his vast intelligence, was not familiar with, as he did not have possums in his universe. Stark then continued, where he told the men that he initially believed them to be a standard run-of-the-mill heartless corporation. However, he was fascinated at their ability to never repeat mistakes. Their cold, emotionless approach to everything wasn't your standard soulless company behavior. This felt otherworldly, something alien, and after he hacked into their private servers, he told David that they were quite a horrifying box to open. Immediately, an enraged David would then shove the elderly Stark over, where he'd begin to choke the man to the ground. He'd reveal that their world had already been sentenced for termination. They were all long dead and just didn't know it yet. Gasping for air, Tony then asked how long they had, where David, feeling generous with plot exposition today, told the man that they had 16 years until the seed of their extinction arrived, and that he gave humanity and expected 20 years of survival left. Thanking the bot for the information, we see things played right into Tony's hands, as he had been recording this whole conversation in his hidden Iron Man gauntlet, where the robot came to the full realization of the term plain possum, saying that he would remember this going forward. Coming to present day, we see Tony looking over the decapitated body of one of these David-like androids, where he was having it studied. Somberly looking at the face of the one who brought death to the human race, Stark was interrupted by this world's Captain Marvel, who told him that it was time. It is here that Tony met with some of the last remaining heroes of this world: Bruce Banner, Carol Danvers, and Miles Morales, who is now bonded with the Venom symbiote and the DNA of a facehugger, making him a Venom, Xenomorph, and Spider-Man hybrid, which is admittedly pretty awesome. All bro needs now is a nice clean fade, and maybe a skincare routine. You know they say black don't crack, but Miles, my boy, it's cracking on you. Believing all was lost, Tony told the group that they needed to gather up the remaining pocket of humans that was left so they could evacuate the planet before it was too late. With Miles not exactly keen on giving up the fight and running, Tony agreed that it was not ideal, but they had to save themselves, and he was preparing for this for quite some time. Having Captain Marvel activate a device on her suit, we see the building they were on rumble, where it morphed into a giant spacecraft. Here we see just how far Tony had thought ahead. Not only had he constructed the last living city for humanity, he had turned it into a mobile colony that could escape to the stars so the survivors could repopulate and rebuild their once great race. Noting that they only had about 1,400 people within the colony, Banner didn't think this would be enough to avoid extinction and genetic drift. Tony, however, reassured his old friend, saying that he did the calculations and that it would be enough. Stark then had the team suit up and rally the survivors to get ready and say goodbye to their home planet for the very last time. In the next phase of his plan, Tony then had Carol activate the war machines, which were a fleet of awesome-looking, war machines, which were in charge of blowing up the sanctuary city and its border walls to prevent any potential Xenomorphs from hitching a ride with them to space. Generally successful in their mission, Carol noted that there was a slight problem. One of the sections hadn't been entirely destroyed, only partially, and this was not the work of a war machine. Believing this to be impossible, Tony had his drones get footage to see just what was going on, where he couldn't believe his eyes. This was the work of Captain America, who was revealed to be still alive, leading a group of hundreds of people towards the sanctuary. The shocked Iron Man would tell the good captain that he was too late, as they had already primed the engines to fire and were leaving in less than a minute. Things would be taken back to the ground, where we'd see Steve leading the survivors to safety as they were chased by countless Xenomorphs who were all too ready to claim their next victims. Telling the people to keep going, Steve then faced the beast, noting that he would do all he could to keep these people safe. In the very next scene, we'd see the man combat the Xenos, killing 3 of them with a single toss of his shield. That's honestly pretty sick. I need a figure of Old Man Cap, like yesterday. Bruce would then tell Tony that they needed to delay the launch to save these people, where he argued back, saying they would run the risk of the aliens getting aboard their crafts, spelling doom for those already on board. Being hard-headed as ever, Bruce then stepped out and opened the door to the ship, where he hulked out and leapt to the earth below, saying that if he did not go to help his friend, he would truly be a monster. As Cap would fight tooth and nail against the hordes, he would hear a thunderous crash behind him, where his eyes would be shocked to see his old ally, the Incredible Hulk. Feeling a great sense of nostalgia, both men, knowing this just may be their last battle, tore into the alien threat just so they could give even one person the time they needed to escape. Knowing these men weren't planning on coming back, Tony made the hard decision to commence the launch. We would then see the giant city ignite, where it would take off to the stars, where we'd see the man out of time joined with the green giant as they'd fight to the death on the earth below. Aboard the ship, we'd see the saddened Tony weep over the loss of his friends as they'd make their journey through the dark reaches of the universe. Later on, we'd be taken to a different part of space, where we'd see another ship, a ship that fans of the Alien franchise just may be familiar with. Aboard this craft were engineers wearing similar suits to the ones from the film Prometheus. These beings would then appear to be studying the aftermath of a world destroyed by the David androids from earlier. Using their computers, it would analyze the devastation, which would display one single word. This word being infection. With one of the beings getting inside its iconic space jockey suit, the others could only watch on, where us as the audience could only ponder what their next move would be.